Hello, Abigail here with the astrology for this week. This week is big. It is a lot. It's expansive, and the retrogrades are amping up their energy. We have an eclipse. It's just going to be a big week. Um, I don't ever like to kind of fearmonger around any type of cycle. I also think, due to kind of the runaround that Mars gave us in the past few months and all of the eclipses, I do think that there's actually a really special energy between these eclipses for some really beautiful eclipse gifts. So the gifts that you never knew you needed, but you desperately did, they're not going to be what you expect. It's not going to happen the way you've planned, but you are going to see some really beautiful things. So that's kind of where we're starting from this week. So the first thing we have is Tuesday. We have Venus retrograde conjunct Mercury, and they're going to be doing this dance across the sky. As towards the end of this week, we're also going to have Mercury retrograde. So close to the same degree that Venus stationed retrograde, and they basically shadow each other the entire retrograde. Also, it's important to note that these eclipses happen right around those same degrees too. I think Venus stations at like 24 degrees of Pisces, and the Virgo eclipse, which while the eclipse is happening in Virgo, the sun is going to be at 23 degrees of Pisces. And then when we have the eclipse in Aries at 9 degrees, that's where Mercury stations retrograde, Venus stations retrograde at 10 degrees. So there's this really massive kind of echo and shadowing of but between all of these different events and planets. So just realize that these are all stacking up. um and also something important to note, even though we're not quite to the not the Aries retrograde, God, I'm a mess today, the Aries eclipse, you can tell Mercury is about station retrograde when I fall apart more than normal. I'm Mercury ruled. So we also have Mars at the same degree as that full moon that we had back in Libra season. So there's just a massive kind of story within a story within a story in this eclipse season, which we officially get into the thick of it this week with that eclipse. I will also do a video specifically on the eclipse, so we're not going to dwell on that as much today. Um, but just know that this energy has been kind of percolating and processing and is very tied to the Mars retrograde. Obviously, we're going through the shadow period. That doesn't end, I want to say, until either late April or early May. So we're still going through those retrograde degrees. Um, but yeah, there's a lot going on. And if you do feel worn out, the energy is still intense. The energy is still a lot this week. But we do get this beautiful, coming back full circle, beautiful conjunction between Mercury and Venus. It's a great day for the expression of desire. It's a great day to talk about your values and what you want and the things that really get you going, and also recognizing maybe where that isn't happening, because often we look at Venus as the planet of like yes and more and of course, but it's also the planet, which I heard, I want to say Stephen Forrest, another older astrologer, saying that Venus is also the planet of no. Venus also says, if it's the planet of values, it's what we want and also what we don't want. So, Tuesday is a good day to check in with what you want, what you don't want, what you need, what you don't need, where you're feeling craving and desire and detriment Venus feelings of, this endless bottomless pit of needing to have your needs met in a certain way. Doesn't mean that they're ever going to be met completely, but it does mean that it's an endless exploration of what you desire. And so on this day, it's a great day to do that thought, that thought exercise, to ask yourself, what do I want? What do I need? What are my desires telling me about where I am and where I would like to go? And let that kind of be a guide as we're in a time of having to re understand and reprocess stuff. I also want to say people's kind of aha moments in retrogrades happen based on their personal charts. I tend to either have an aha moment right around, um, at least with Mercury, right around the Sun Kazemi, maybe a little after. With Venus, my aha moments tend to be like a month out from the Venus stationing direct after the retrograde. It takes me some time to digest. Mars retrogrades, I'm usually pretty aware the whole time what's going on, but I'm not able to do anything about it until later, which drives me nuts. So just know that you digest and you engage with retrogrades in your own unique way, and you're not going to follow the pattern of everyone else. Um, and that whenever you have that moment of understanding, that is your moment. And if you haven't had it yet, it's coming. Um, so this conjunction is kind of setting us up for that Mercury stationing retrograde by the end of the week. Um, it's also a great time of expression. I think one of the downsides of Venus retrograde is a lot of times we might back down on expressing or go to it's an energy of extremes, either back down on expression and really keep to ourselves or go to the extreme of expressing everything all the time all at once, which can also be too much. So this is a great day to kind of temper it. If you haven't shared enough, it's the day to share. And if you are maybe overwhelming yourself, it's the day to be like, hey, how can I be more concise with my desires? How can I be more thoughtful with the way I present these very urgent needs without diminishing their urgency, but making them understandable to people around me? Then on Wednesday, we have the Sun conjunct Saturn, which I think is really important, especially in a sign like Pisces, because we get some much needed visibility. We don't get a whole lot of visibility in Pisces. Pisces is deep and expansive, and the bounds are limitless, and Saturn comes in and like sets up shop and puts limitations on that expansion, but we're still not quite aware of what's happening. So when we hit a nice conjunction with the sun, yes, it might feel like we're not getting what we want. It might feel like things aren't moving quick enough for us. However, on the bright side, it is a moment to pause and to kind of take stock at what's happening around you and the lessons that you've been learning through this Saturn cycle, and um, just keeping track of where you are, and also not always requiring yourself to constantly progress. I think, if anything, the Mars retrograde taught us that constant progression is just not possible, and that we do need downtime and we do have to take breaks. And with the Sun conjunct Saturn, we might want to get up and go because, we're like, oh, that's what's happening. Now I can fix it. It's not quite time yet. The eclipse is very much needed to help us understand that because of the interaction with the nodes, which are right next to them right now. Um, so take it as a moment to really get a good glimpse of your path ahead, to really kind of be like, oh, that's where I've been limited, or that's where I need to set a boundary, or this is where I should kind of plant my flag and not back down. That's the kind of day this is. I don't necessarily think it's a day to be like, aha, time to forge ahead. Especially with Venus retrograde and Mercury, very close to stationing retrograde. Um, but it is time to kind of check in. This week is very much, with the exception of the eclipse, well, with the exception of everything else, those two things, the Mercury conjunction with Venus, Saturn conjunct the Sun, it's very much a check in moment, a moment of being like, this is where we are, this is how we progressed, this is how I would like to change, this is where I would like to remain the same. Um, this is where my boundaries have gotten too loose, and this is where maybe they can be eased up a little bit. Just coming in and checking in rather than revamping the whole thing. None of us have much energy right now, unless you have kind of an exceptional chart that doesn't really get affected as much by this energy. And by exceptional, I mean chaotic. Lots of retrogrades, lots of detriment. Um, that tends to handle this better. So just let yourself check in. Also, know that we are building towards the eclipse on Friday. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're going to need your energy for that eclipse to kind of ride it out. Like I said at the beginning of this, I don't personally think that this is all doom and gloom. Now, obviously, some of you have some specific things in your chart. Um, Nodes in the 12th and the 8th present differently than other nodes do. um Also, like, because they're oppositions, that would include the second and the sixth. Those, maybe things are a little different, so keep an eye on that. Kind of look back at your personal journey. A great way to understand eclipses and how they affect you is to look back at the years that those nodes were in the sign, the house, the place, that they are now, and remembering what happened then. 12th and 8th house can have a lot to do with death and dying and passing and having to be reborn or having to release control. So just know that if you have those, I don't know that this will resonate. It might. Um, but I do feel that this Friday eclipse is a special gift from Virgo. Virgo is here to kind of start to clean up the chaos that was the, Aries Libra moment. Now, Libra does pretty good job at keeping things tidy, but Virgo is coming in and sweeping things up and kind of clearing space for the work that it's going to have to do in these nodes. It's going to be going through the little fine tuning of the house. And now, the downside of this is that Virgo can get obsessive and possibly compulsive and overly hyper focus on something and get way too, I'm thinking this is bothering me. Oop. Um, and get way too like caught up and concerned with details that just don't really matter. Details that are details, and that's just what they are. They don't need to be messed with. They don't need to be understood. So there's that tendency to overly focus on the small things. But when Virgo really gets in there, gets its hands dirty, it can really kind of parse out and find a story or a thread and then have the skill and the dexterity to follow that very delicate thread to the places you need to get, to the information you need to find, and also then help you digest it because Virgo rules the stomach and digestive systems, to digest and to understand things. So, this eclipse is actually a great time for inspiration. It's a great time to understand what things are. It's also a great time to do really small, fine work. If you do needlework, which I do, great time for this. I'm currently stitching something. If you do a handcraft of any kind, Virgo things are great with handcrafts. If you do anything that requires a magnifying glass or something like that, this is your moment to shine. Um, but I do think that maybe not on this eclipse, but in the 2 weeks between this eclipse and the Aries eclipse, something really special is going to happen. Something that you've wanted for a long time but didn't believe was possible. And for some of us, I think it's going to be really big and loud. But for some of us, it's also going to be really small. Something that we've always wanted but isn't an essential. Like getting something you wanted as a kid that maybe you don't need now, but the recognition of that long awaited extra special something, that feeling of, desiring something and then getting it. That's what I'm getting. And I've talked to a couple other astrologers. There's not really anything to like put your finger on. This is really more of an intuition, but there is something special here, something long awaited. The eclipses, because of their nature, are really supportive for things that you have struggled to get. Um, they're not great at things that are easy to get. They're great at things you've struggled to get. So keep an eye out for what this little gift might be in the next 2 weeks. Just a quick overview of this. Like I said, I'll do a video later. We've got a beautiful trine to Uranus, an opposition to Saturn, the North Node. It's conjunct the South Node, conjunct Neptune. This is an incredibly magical eclipse. But as is my very technical and magical advice for any eclipses, buckle up. Just buckle up. Let the energy do what the energy wants to do. Don't try to control it. Don't try to manipulate it. You can work with eclipses. My kind of general advice for working specifically with eclipses is to use it for things that are eclipse like. Use it for things that are overblown and overwhelming. Or use it to work with something that has an eclipse story already built in. Otherwise, it can be questionable what you're unleashing. But that's just my advice. Some chaos demons that I know work with eclipses, and it's great, but it's for a very specific type of chaotic, intense person who has the capacity in the birth chart to handle that kind of energy. I don't. I have the capacity to handle it when it is worked into the fabric of something else, but not to just drop eclipse energy into a situation and be like, boom, I'm going to watch this unravel. That's just not me. So you can work with it or not. My kind of thing with eclipses is I use them as a way to kind of take downtime, to kind of untether myself from having to do specific things and forcing myself into a specific mold. I just let the chips fall where they will, and I pick up the pieces when I need to and where I need to. Anyways, I will do a video about this later. And then we have our kind of final moment, which is Saturday. Mercury stations retrograde. So this is our last major personal planet stationing retrograde, of course, not direct, for a minute. It's great. We'll have another Mercury retrograde in a couple of months, but This is kind of that last grinding to a halt to then go backwards moment, which I find much harder than the grinding to a halt to go forwards. At least that one I'm like, in a couple of hours we'll be there. With these retrogrades, I'm like, well, this is the beginning of something special. And by special, we might put that in our quotes, depending on how it goes. So, yeah, this is a week of changes and shifts. There are things in this week that we just don't know how they're going to turn out. It doesn't make them bad, it doesn't make them good. They are what they are, and they will present in your chart how other things have presented with similar energy. If you are curious, go back and check 9 years ago what was going on. They go in 9 and 18 year cycles. So the opposition of this would be 9 years ago. And then 18 years ago would have been the conjunction. If you were old enough, you will have some memory of what that 18 years ago was like. You can also look at the mutable squares. So what was happening with, you know, Gemini and Sagittarius, which that cute one was during 2020. So keep an eye on that. Um, See what was happening then, because that's the square that kind of is a hauling up short of this kind of massive cycle. Um, and then you can check the inverse of that, which would have been, now I have to do math. I'm not going to do that. What? 4 minus 18? Okay, 14 years. I can do that. 14 years ago. 14 to not 15. Yeah, 14, 15 years ago. So you can check that. You can also double check where the nodes were by pulling up a website and pulling up chart at that time. I find it's always good to, if you want to work with astrology long term, it's always good to go back and kind of track your life based on those themes and see where they line up, see where stuff was moving, when stuff wasn't moving. Um, I find it also very helpful, just because I've been through a lot, to look up traumatic events and kind of correlate that. You can't stop bad things from happening, but you can kind of prepare yourself to be like, hey, this is going to be at least some kind of encore, and I want to be, at least taking care of myself during that time. Same with these eclipses. So I will do a longer video on this. I will also draw cards for them. Try to enjoy this week. The energy is going to be magical, but maybe more magical in kind of a practical way rather than, sparkles and fairies and things like that, which I love those too. But this is more magical as in like quirks and unique things and things we never thought possible happening. It's a little more like actual fairy tale magic, not Disney magic, if that makes sense. But hopefully not Eastern European. I went through a stint of reading Eastern European novels, not novels, but fairy tales when I was like in my early teens, because I was interested in fairy tales. And let me tell you, were they dark? You think the German novels are bad? Look up the Polish ones. Anyways, I love you all. And if you have any questions about this energy or would like a reading or anything, you can always contact me through my website, thekingwitch.com. And gosh, my phone keeps getting notifications. And I'm not going to re record this whole thing. You can contact me pretty much anywhere: Instagram, TikTok, through my website. You can see what I have to offer. I also do karmic rectification if you're interested in past life work. All right, my loves, have a blessed week, and I will see you in a different space and time.